Hey everyone, Blaine here, and I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, which is actually my hometown, and we're at gate 19, and we're going to do a quick flight to Calgary. We're in Zibo's 737-800, and it's a beautiful day, so with that, let's get started. We're going to jump into the FMC first. We're running Zibo's mod version 3.22x, and I'll go through the entire procedure of what I do to fly, so it'll be partially instruction so that you can follow along and get yourself acquainted with the systems in this aircraft and be able to actually fly well. So we're going to start by going FMC, position initial. We're currently at Edmonton, which is CYEG. We're going to line select here, then we're going to go to route. We're going to take off from runway 12, and our destination is CYYC, or Calgary. And we're going to go to preference initial. Our cost index is going to be 50. Our reserves are going to be 1. We're going to hit here. Our flight level is going to be 156, so 15,600. And we're going to execute that. We now go to N1 limit. We have to set the temperature. We find that just above our engine screen here, so that's 10 degrees Celsius. So because we're on the other side of the backslash, we're going to go backslash 10, line select here, and we're set there. We're going to select 2 and then climb 1. And we're going to go to takeoff. We're going to set flaps to 5. Now that flaps have been entered, we want to make sure that flaps are actually configured. So I'm going to put the flaps down to 5. And we're going to select our trim, and it's 4.68, so we want to get our trim set. So these trim settings here go up in integers of 1, so we want to go halfway between 4 and 5. Back to the FMC. We're going to select our V-speeds. 138 is going to be our V2 speed, so we're going to go to the MCP and we're going to set that. Additionally, because we have our altitude, we're going to set that as well. It's going to be 15,600. Back to the FMC. We're now going to go to departure arrival. Because we're departing from Edmonton, we want to select departure. We're going to use JEV1, and we're going to go to route, and then activate, and hit execute. This activates our flight plan. We're then going to go back to departure arrival and select Calgary's arrival. And we're going to select our star, which is ADVOC 6. And we're going to use, I believe I used ALCIV last time. Yeah. And we're going to come in on runway 17 right. And we're going to hit execute here. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go to legs, and we need to make sure that our flight plan is correct. So before we do that, we have to configure the nav screen to plan. We need to set this to 10 so that we can see all the waypoints. We're then going to go back to the FMC, and you're going to want to zoom out a bit here so that you can see the FMC and the screen in the same window. And we're going to go through this step by step to check all of the waypoints to make sure our flight plan is complete and all of the waypoints connect. So we're going to hit step. I've flown this route a lot of times, so I know exactly how to fix it, but I'll explain why. So we have a vector here, and that kind of takes us, then there's a major discontinuity here, which we obviously don't want. So we're going to select here, and we're going to go to previous page, and we're going to hit, that one there, the route discontinuity. And then we're going to hit leave again, and go previous page, and hit vector, and hit enter, and we're going to continue along now. And so you see right here, we have to go and make a turn and then another turn, so we don't want to do that. But first of all, we have to get rid of this vector as well. So we're going to select erroneous, and then select a vector, and hit execute, and that will remove that. And then we're going to select erroneous, and we're going to remove upton, and hit execute, and then that makes it an easy basically turn, and so then we only have a straight line, then we turn base, and it's pretty easy. So we're going to go back to the very start here, and we're going to do this again. So we're going to go step, and we have a good flight path there. So we're going to go to legs. We're going to go back to our main view here, change this to back to map, and back to 40. Now we have to configure other things in the aircraft. We're going to go to the overhead panel, and we're going to set our engine start to continuous, set our strobe light to on, landing lights on. We're going to put on window heat and probe heat. We're going to set our altitude to 16,000. This only goes up in 500, so we're going to set it to 16. And then to get the landing alt, we need to know what the landing altitude is. And how we do that is we go to the FMC, and we look for your Final Appraoch Fix. So you want to go next page, next page. So the altitude just before the runway, right here, which will be 4,860. So we're going to go back to the overhead panel and put in 5,000 here. The engines are already started in this aircraft, so because of that, I'm not going to go through the whole process. Obviously, I'm not going to hit absolutely everything. 49, I think, actually will be okay. Yeah, 48.6, so that's fine. Okay, overhead panel is good. We're going to go to our radio panel and just make sure, okay, we don't need to do anything there. That's good. We're now going to go to the MCP and configure that. So we're going to turn on the master flight director, the slave flight director, ARM auto throttle, ARM VNAV, ARM LNAV, set brakes to rejected takeoff. And then I think we are pretty much good to go. So I am going to taxi here. I'm not going to use ATC to do that. I'm just going to taxi because I actually kind of know the airport. So with that, let's put on thrust reversers. And we will release the parking brake. And we will get out of here. Cancel thrust reversers. Okay, and now we're going to taxi to runway 12. Oh, did I not turn the parking brake off? My bad. There we go. It's actually kind of a really easy airport to navigate. When I was actually 18, I worked at this airport as a security officer, and I got to drive on the runways and the taxiways. It was really kind of cool, actually. We don't have any other aircraft in here, but always a good idea to kind of check for any cross traffic. And we're good. It's just good to get into a habit of doing these kind of things. I eventually hope to use Pilot Edge, and I've been studying for it, but it's a lot of learning, yeah. So. Okay, so with that, I'm going to slow us down. So the last thing we need to do before we take off, and I just want to explain this because this is really important here, you can either use this by having a hotkey, or you can select the button over here. So this right here is known as toga, or takeoff go around, and it's really important to hit because it gives the FMC the authority to change speeds and things like that as you're taking off, so it's really important. So what will happen is you will want to, when you release the parking brake, you want to hit that button immediately, and then you should be good to go. So with that in mind, I'm going to just activate flight path vector. We want to set our N1 limit to 40%, so we're 40% on our engine screen here. We're as close to that as we can get. Doesn't have to be exactly 40%. And that's fine. Okay, so let's go. So we're going to do toga, and then we're good. Oh, I see our auto throttle wasn't armed. My bad. There we go. Sorry about that. Auto throttle wasn't rearmed. And when we get to 138, we're going to rotate the aircraft. Rotate aircraft. Positive rate, gear up. Following the flight director. It's been 1,000 feet, so I'm going to nose down. Our speed's going to increase. I'm going to activate autopilot, and I'm going to put the flaps up. And we are climbing. And I'm going to put the gear into the lock position. Once you have done this, you can basically put your throttle to idle. You don't need to touch it. It doesn't need to be moved. You can see our speed is slowing down, and that's normal because it will remain at 250 below 10,000 feet, but it's not going to take us long to get there. So as you can see here on the navigational display, you have a T/C. That's basically top of climb, and that is when the aircraft reaches basically its top of climb, which is 15,600 feet, or its cruise altitude given by the FMC. You don't have to do anything for that. You just kind of have to know when you're there. So for example, a trigger to know that you're at top of climb obviously is your altitude is not increasing, but you'd also want to make sure that your speed is what it's supposed to be at, because sometimes the FMC can do kind of weird things or wonky things where it doesn't do that for the speed. I sometimes get that when I fly from San Diego to Los Angeles. And so how you check to know what your speed is if you go to the FMC and you go to legs, right here it will tell you what your speed is going to be. So we're supposed to be at 303 knots. And once we get to 10,000 feet, our speed will change. We're approaching 10,000 feet, so we're going to jump to the overhead panel. We're going to change our engine starts back to auto, and we're going to turn the landing lights off. So we're just about to come to top of climb. So you've just heard a buzz. It was kind of like a dull buzz sound, and that's basically the computer letting us know that we are approaching our altitude of 15,600, and that the plane's going to basically slow down and level off to that altitude. You'll also know you're almost there because, as you can see here, we have this little red rectangle, and also the rate indicator here is leveling off. So now that we're basically at our top of climb, we're going to go to the FMC and just check a couple of things. We're going to go to progress, and we're going to see how far we are from Calgary. So we'll arrive at 2,151 hours, and it is currently 2,122 hours, so we got 30 minutes before we get there, and probably about 15 or so minutes before we really gotta, get our stuff together and make sure we're doing everything ready for our approach. The other thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to our legs, and we're going to see, okay, AdVox is transition. Now, I do this a lot of the times in the initial phase, and I just kind of wasn't remembering to do it, but if you look at these speeds here, as we descend, we're going to be reducing our speed. Now, when we get to here, traveling at 220 knots and then going to 150 knots in 7 nautical miles really isn't realistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to change these speeds so the FMC knows to slow down more. And how we do that is we just kind of enter them in ourselves. So generally, when you your speed for just before you hit the runway will be around 130 knots. The FMC will give you a specific speed, and if you go to init-ref right here, it'll tell you, it's going to be 130 knots when we finally get to that point. But what I usually do is I make it just a little bit more than that, just because, you obviously don't want to slow down and have, take as much time as you want to for your approach, because you have traffic behind you, so you want to have a little bit more, speed. So what I usually do in this instance is the Final Appraoch Fix, which is the last waypoint just before the runway. I usually set this at 135, and then I line select here, and then I go in intervals of 20. So I'll go 155, and then 175, and then I usually make it so it's 230. So yeah, so I'll make it 205. Split the difference a little bit there. And then that makes it so that the plane will gradually slow down here, and that should work out pretty good. So, with that in mind, if I just want to see how far we are to our top of descent, we got a ways to go. Ways to go before that happens. So with that in mind, if I go back to the FMC and I go to we had 64 nautical miles. Yeah, so we got lots of time. So with that in mind, guys, just kind of sit back, enjoy the flight. I'll take some external shots on the camera, and we'll talk to you in just a little bit. Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm back now, and so as you can see, we're about to make our turn and begin into our transition. Okay, so we're getting really close now to our top of descent. As you can see, it says T/D. Top of descent means that we are going to obviously begin our descent into Calgary, and there's a couple of things we need to do just before we get to there. We're about, 15 nautical miles out, so once we get there, we're going to, just before, we're going to want to change a couple of settings. There's 4 things that we need to do. We need to put our descent descent altitude into the FMC, which will be the amount I apologize, basically, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word, I'm so sorry guys, basically the altitude, if you will, above sea level, just before the runway, and that was that 46, I think it was 48 actually, 4860. That was the amount that we put into the overhead panel. We also need to configure the course. We also need to set the ILS frequencies, and we need to set our auto brakes. So let's jump into the FMC. We'll go to init ref, and we're going to select our flap speed here. We're good there. Course is 164, and we're going to go to legs, and we're going to go to next page. So this value right here is what we want to put into the MCP. So let's do that now. 4900. We're going to set our course, which was 164. And we're going to make sure that that information is correct. 164. We're going to set our ILS frequency, which is 109.30. So we're going to jump to our radios. And we're going to go and make sure that our auto brakes are set to 2. And so with that, the plane is going to decel a little bit, and we're going to, once we cross over this T/D here, we're going to be in our descent kind of profile, or beginning it at least. We got a ways to go before we get to Calgary, but we needed to make those changes before. Now, if you remember, we changed our speeds in the FMC so that the plane would kind of naturally slow down. If we go to legs here, we didn't enter 230, but the FMC did. But now it's going to slow down, and then it's going to go to 205, and it's going to gradually take us in. Now, as you can see, this drag required just came up. Sometimes that'll happen where basically the aircraft is slowing down, but because it is descending, we're naturally incurring speed on the fuselage, and so we need to help the plane slow down, if you will. So with the FMC here, in a 2.7 nautical miles, we want to be at 230. And you know what? Hey, we're kind of far away from that. So we want to deploy the speed brake. And then that will help the plane slow down a good amount. Still going to take a little bit of time, but that's okay. You don't have to be exactly at that speed. It's not, absolutely critical. It's obviously good to be, but the world isn't going to end if you're not at 230 at that waypoint. That's okay. And so we're approaching 230, and I'm going to take the speed brake off. We're about to cross over to the next waypoint, and then it's going to want to slow down again. 205. Yep, so we're going to put it back on. we're approaching 205, so I'm going to put the speed brake up again. Okay, so we're coming up on Flam. Flam, we're at 205, that's great. And then when we cross over that waypoint, we're going to want to go to 175. So we are 27 nautical miles to Calgary. Now in this instance here, we have the speed brake deployed, it's to selling. In the event that it doesn't, ever slow down, even with the speed brake extended, what you can do is you can actually circumvent the speed on the FMC, and that will slow it down even more. So when we go to here, we want to be at 175, so what we're going to do is we're going to manually change the speed, and you hit the speed intervene button here, and then you dial this down to the speed you want to be at, so 175, and then the aircraft will basically force into that speed. As you can see here, we're now approaching 10,000 feet, so with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and go back to our overhead panel. We're going to set our engines to continuous, we're going to put our landing lights on. Coming up to 175 here. Okay, and so now we're coming up to our kind of our last waypoint before we turn base, and we want to be at 155 by the time we get there. So we're going to dial this down to 155. I'm also going to hit map now to check where we are in position to the airport. And let's see here. So we've already done this, but always a good idea just to hit tune nav 1. And we can actually select the approach, so that's good. So that's all configured. Just heard the FMC beep. Yeah, drag required. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm going to extend the speed brakes again. I'm also going to hit flaps 1. Okay, so everything looks good. We are coming up on Erroneous, and then we're going to turn base into the airport. And we already have our ILS configured, so we're doing really good. Speed is where it needs to be, landing lights are on. Everything's good so far. Miles, 2154. Okay, so how many? 12 nautical miles to Calgary. Okay. Sorry about that, you probably saw the speed jump up. I wanted to turn speed intervene off and see if it would let the FMC do it, and it didn't. So, and as you can tell here, it says MCP speed, and so that's because it's taking over this instead of using the other one that we programmed into the FMC. So now we are turning base into the airport, and what we'll do is once we basically complete our turn, I'm going to check the glide slope, and then I'm going to configure the aircraft for approach. Change this to 145, and our diamond is there. Good on the glide. We're a little bit low, so VOR lock should hopefully capture it, and then approach. We're going to go flaps down. Still below the glide slope. FMC, we are 2 nautical miles. Okay, we're going to go geared down, flaps down. Turn the FMC or the MCP speed to 135. Flaps down again. Gear is locked and good. We're a bit low for the PAPL lights. Flaps down again. Down. Okay, PAPL lights are even, that's good, we want to see that. Flaps down. And flaps 40. Set at 131. And the glide slope has captured. It should have captured a little while ago. I was a little bit late entering it. Okay, so we have our MCP speed set. Our landing gear is down and locked. We've captured the glide slope as we're right onto that. Flaps are at 40. Our brakes are set to 2, so we're good. Just gotta come in here. PAPL lights are double, so that's good. So we're coming in. We're going to do a 5-degree flare when we make contact with the runway, and then nose down. We're going to manually brake. We're going to take off auto throttle, and we're going to brake and engage reversers. So we're good. I'm going to take control of the aircraft now. And we're going to do a 5-degree flare.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
And nose down. Speed brake extended. Manually brake. And we're good. I apologize that reversers didn't activate correctly. I gotta look into that. I've been having an issue with it lately. And we're gonna exit the runway. Coming up to a runway here, so I just want to check. Nothing's coming. I don't have any other aircraft in the actual game, but it's just kind of a good habit to be in, so that when you actually start, you know, using Pilot Edge or something like that, that you already kind of know what to do when crossing runways and things like that. Okay, so we're here in Calgary, and we landed successfully, and we are at our gate, and everything's good. Calgary, little fun fact, is actually the home of WestJet, which is a Canadian airline which services all of Canada and parts of the United States and so forth. So, another successful flight from Calgary, or from Edmonton to Calgary, and thanks for watching.